We have got a really great session today as we prepare to talk to you about the employee experience. What I say about that, we're all in an environment right now where there are worker shortages, huge competition for the same roles between companies, and resignations continues to be a challenge. So the employee experience is really critical in this environment, and I'm excited to talk about that topic in depth today. As I as I was introduced, my name is Andrea Shaw. I'm the head of talent strategy and transformation at Eightfold. I joined Eightfold about 18 months ago. Prior to that, I had a 25-year career at American Express. And so the employee experience is near and dear to my heart. Much of my experience at Amex was in the business. I was the head of the Platinum Centurion card, and I was tapped on the shoulder to bring kind of the customer experience lens to employees, and I joined HR. So I'm very passionate about this topic. I think it's so important. Um, so with me today, I have Armin from excuse me, from Mercer. So I'm going to hand it over to Armin. Armin's got some great information. He's a deep subject matter expert on this topic, and looking forward to some great insights he's going to share with us.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. So welcome also from my side. My name is Armin von Roschleit. I'm calling in today from Stuttgart, Germany. I say that because Stuttgart, Germany is the town where the car actually was born. And you will see that I'm a car guy during my presentation because there are some pictures around cars and some analogies we're going to use. Yeah, be excited about it. 2 or 3 facts about my role within Mercer and why we are here today and why we think, this is a value add for you joining this webinar. So driving the HR transformation at Mercer, and with my background of 20 years in the business, in both sides, consulting and HR, I learned one thing. Transformation is never an one-dimensional thing, right? It's always about process, system, organization, content, and sync. We come to this a little bit later. And we learned in a positive and in a hard way the last 3 to 4 years, that there is no way of transforming workforce and our organization without technology. But, getting this into sync and not only pushing out technology, but make it an experience and make it embraceable by our workforce and a business leverage. I think that is one of our key drivers. And this is why we want to start today with looking into the HR function as one of our, let's say, main contributors when it comes to employee experience, right? And let me start with the first analogy here when it's about, technology progressing the HR function and cars, right? Right now, the HR function is progressing so fast, it's developing so fast. Technology is giving us so much opportunity with, talent marketplace, skill-based organization, so on and so on. So it feels like, we're in a high-speed electric car and accelerated to top speed, right? The problem is we also have to keep an eye on the HR function. So if you, take the HR function as the charging and the charging infrastructure, because we're maintaining the workforce, right? We have to ensure that everything we do is connected, sustainable. That justifies to talk about how to change the HR function as well for a better experience and then get connected and embrace technology to make this a success. So let me get started perhaps with a couple of insights. What we're hearing as Mercer when we talk with our clients, HR leaders, CEOs, CFOs, we run talent trends. We just recently ran one of the largest HR org surveys globally to find out what's on the mind of HR and what's driving them, but also what we're seeing out there in the market. So one thing super interesting, the HCM software market is projected to reach 29 billion. So there's a lot of investment into technology. We see that almost all organizations recognize that this is the biggest lever to leapfrog the function, but also leapfrog the contribution of the workforce. But on the same hand side, right, recession fears. Still, people, not all people are quitting their jobs, right? This is the question. So why can we keep them? 20 years ago, not even 20 years ago, 10 years ago, financial crisis, when there was the recession, actually nobody was quitting because they tried to embrace the employer and said, okay, don't lay me off, right? So we were looking for security. That's different this time, right? So we still see high numbers of turnover in the workforce. We are facing recession, I think, for a little bit longer than we are anticipating, right? So the inflation is 40 years high, right? On a 40 years high. So how do we face that? But it's almost like the HR market is developing diametral. Labor shortage is getting worse, right? And I think it'll stay for decades because it'll be hard to turn around I'm missing that word in English. I'm sorry for that. Well, let me explain it in an example, right? We cannot give birth to people who are 20 years old, fully studied, right, and ready to work. So we cannot flip the pyramid of the age structure we are facing here, right? So other than having immigrants coming to countries regardless and contributing their work into our workforce, there is no way to grow out this problem, right? And there are questions about how much HR will we need in the future, right? Will technology fully replace HR? I mean, even down to we have interesting studies started around how blockchain and crypto can potentially give relief on the always there problem of payroll, right? So interesting times for HR, interesting and challenging times for HR leaders to navigate through. So today, my goal is to give you a little glimpse into how the HR function could be built differently and how technology is leveraging this new setup. So let me get started with why we think HR is still needed and even more needed than in the past. So HR is needed as a strategic partner. From our global talent trends, we know that the business agenda and people agenda never have been more intertwined, right? And you can see this. I mean, I have the global lens on. I remember like 1 year ago, the United Kingdom, the British Army had to step in to bring gas to the gas stations because they had a shortage in truck drivers, right? Nobody had foreseen that it could be so escalated in that sense, right? So where did it come from? Nobody did see it coming. Well, I would say the data was there, but nobody was reading it, right? So in the future, this should not happen again if we are prepared for that and utilizing good technology. Other key mark here, 41% say the fundamental shift in our business requires a reset of workforce and workplace, right? So the traditional job, and my fellow colleague Robin Chastain has written a great book about work without jobs, right? It's changing, the environment is changing. Skills is the new currency, for an employer within your organization. And contributing these skills to the success of the company is the way how to create value, right? People have to give up embracing their old job structure, job architecture, right? This is not giving the right impulse to the organization in the future. And there's a need for change, right? 76% said the pandemic forced us to rethink our HR model, right? The always there 3-pillar model, and we saw this also in the survey we just finished, right, is about to be questioned because most of these thinking and roles and processes were born 30 to 40 years ago, right? But technology has progressed so far, we can give much more technology and focus our personal interaction very differently. We'll come to this in a minute. And you know it as customers, you know it as being in the market out there. 96% of the organizations are planning to redesign the HR function for greater impact, right? So, and we can tell by the business we are running right now in HR transformation, this is definitely true. Sometimes it's just, adjusting roles around talent. Sometimes it's the whole system. Sometimes it's shared services. And also, how to shift tasks more to shared services, which were supposed to be COE work before that. So that being said, we started to challenge ourselves as well a couple of years ago around, what is it, what people need from HR? Is it all the same, or is it same but different, right? So what are targeted interactions between HR and our workforce? So we came to the conclusion that yes, there is a certain commodity of HR, right? So 80% of an HR service portfolio are still the same, and will just, will not dramatically change, right? The things how we run operations, the things how we run transactional business, from compensation benefits to total rewards. These are things, where we have less influence because this is almost like a foundational service to our workforce. But this is also the service where it's hard to determine a value add, right? It's hard to determine a lever. So that's one. And the other thing is not everyone needs the same. We follow a concept where you say like, there is different value contribution by the workforce, or different people dependency by the workforce, by a organization. So giving you an example, our business, consultancy, advocate, something like that, has a 10 out of 10 when it comes to people dependency. A construction company might only have a 3 out of 10 when it comes to people dependency of their business model, right? But there's no company without people dependency, as we just learned the hard way. I just lost my luggage 6 months ago because there was no one unloading. And so it was, staying in the airport. And it took me almost 4 months to get it back. So that's how you learn, that also hands in the chain missing can disturb a whole value chain. So most times in the past, we saw this here. So HR kind of, got a new task, you got to take care of this too. And it's almost like, you have the smart car. It's like, hey, it's a car. It has 4 wheels, right? It's HR. They can do this. We can go off-road with that, right? But this is, these times are over. You cannot just put more work and more impact on the shoulders of HR, right? So in the next page, you see this will crash, right? So this is really something where HR is cornered again. So you have to switch here. I didn't hit the arrow. So we got to get out of this corner that HR, you can continue business as they did, right? We have to embrace that there is a very different situation right now when it comes to the HR function. So how do we actually get to a great HR? And this is a concept, I think, I don't know if you have heard of that already, but we call it TIM before TOM, envision before you build the function. So TIM stands for the target interaction model design versus target operating model. What do we mean here? So we try to dissect between what are our internal target groups and how can we segment these, like employees, people leaders, executives, and so on and so on. And what is our HR service portfolio? And what are the intended interactions we want to build to make this a success, right? Instead of building boxes and lines first, put names on it, cut processes into pieces just to say like that, just to find something you could throw potentially in a shared service, but jeopardize the employee experience, right? Just for the sake of cost savings. So we say before you go into an operating model design, you have to think through the target interaction models first. That being said, how can we make this tangible? And start with the business is the most important imperative. We've seen, and this might be a difference between Europe and the US in particular. In Europe, we see a lot of discussions within HR about like their role perception, their self-understanding, how HR is being perceived by the business, right? You have to start with the business. There is no arguing about the importance of HR if HR is already well connected to the business. And this funnel here is actually showing quite well, how you can get started. So the first thing for all HR functions is understand the business challenges, right? And the biggest business challenge we are facing is talent shortage, labor shortage, and the transformation of our workforce, the talent experience-based or skill-based workforce. This is driving us, right? Regardless how high your people dependency is or not. This has to be translated in the HR challenges. We have to find out, how can we ensure that there's a sustainable connection between business challenges and HR challenges, and then you start deriving the HR strategy, derive the matching HR portfolio. So what are the services you got to provide to ensure that you're actually paying into these needs, these business challenges, that you can help solving them. Then you design the interaction model where you say, who are our customers to interact with, right? And how? And what is the organizational model to deliver that? There would be a sixth layer there, which is if you're an international or multinational organization, you might see something like country blueprints here. Because not all HR functions can be replicated in every country. If you're running a country with 40 employees, right, you won't have a full stack HR function there, right? But you have to discuss through the target interaction model exercise, how do we actually serve them? Well, the good news is technology gets everywhere, right? So this is our network we put underneath all of that. So get started on the customer side, because we talked about experience and talent experience being so important. So understand the basic needs of your employees and segment them into target groups. This is the starting point, right? Not what kind of HR services you want to push out into the organization. If you don't achieve high acceptance, we call it service adoption, then everything you design in your HR function, will fall on the ground. People will deviate it. They will go around it. They will go to the business partner and say, yeah, forget all this BS, right? So let's continue our business how we did it the last 10 years, right? That's much easier, right? Times are challenging enough. But if you understand what they actually need, right, you can make them embrace what you're actually serving. So one example here, right? So what are potential segmented target groups? You have a potential employee. You might have external temporary staff, contractors, and so on. We also have to consider how to recognize remote employees, right? We are in a different world now, right? It might be that you source your smartest and brightest people in a different state, different time zone, or in a different continent, different country, right? So HR has to be ready for that. You have to design this interaction with this employee too, right? Regular employees, sometimes, since we are facing the question where to get more workforce from, right? Former employees. I mean, there's the nice saying here. I don't know if you use the same name in the US, but space cowboys or silverbacks, right? We see large organizations like Bosch or Mercedes-Benz really pulling back in these space cowboys, right? But the question is how to, keep in touch with them and how to select which are the right ones to pull in, right? So, and Andre will talk about, talent and skills in a couple of minutes, but this is the starting point. The Bosch started with, what is our skill gap? What are the skills we cannot find with, at the right scale or the right quality within our organization? So they extended their technology to the alumni network, and alumni here really meant the space cowboys, as they call them, right? And we have people managers, right? People managers driving actually our talent development, but also leadership. And the question is, I mean, it's the secret formula, right? Like the holy grail. If someone finds the way to create great leadership, right? That's the winner, right? We can call it bingo, but we're searching for 50 to 60 years already, and nobody really found it. But there are ways to get closer, right? And there might be something like executives. And then talk about what are actually their needs? What do they strive for? How should the interaction be designed? You see this, it's a bit small in the screen here, but, is it more digital touch or is it more human touch? So executives tend to have a more human touch where the employee, with his day-to-day digital exposure already, is expecting much more digital. We just had a large survey running with Siemens, where we found out that the digital readiness of the workforce, the blue-collar workforce, is much higher than anticipated from the executive management. So we evaluated that by going in there, looking onto their phones, what kinds of apps they have installed. Is it a smartphone? What kind of transactions they run? And behind every app, we had like a complexity index, right? And we found out that they could operate much more complex operations already than the management perceived. The reference group, by the way, was the mid-management, and they only achieved a 63%. So I think that's the reason why they gave the pushback on using more technology and AI. So the next rule, and this is also where technology kicks in, anticipate and design the employee lifecycle events. Nothing should really be surprising. Who else but HR owns the lifecycle events, right? One example here is HR operations, but I keep this brief. 90% of the HR operations shared services we get to know are built in a reactive design. They design inbound channels like phone or callback function or emails or case management, right? But they can almost wait till something comes instead of proactively design experiences, right? You can anticipate a pay raise because you do it, right? You can anticipate the talent cycle, life cycle because you run it, right? You can anticipate the need for skills because you sit together with a business and find out what you will need. So you can push out much more, and utilizing technology when we analyze interfaces between, for example, operations platforms, people operations platforms like from UKG, this PeopleDoc or ServiceNow, right? The usage of data. Very often they don't even look further than just this is an employee in a blue collar space, right? But where this person sits, is it a remote worker? You know, what kind of, let's say, job profile sits behind it? What might be interesting as an information, you know, to upskill or, you know, to weigh themselves into more gigs or something like that. This could all be perceived out of the data, which is already there, right? It's not reinventing the wheel here. It's connecting the dots, right? And this is why Eightfold is so great, because it's helping you to connect these dots, right? In particular, when it comes to all the talent-related topics, finding the right talent, connecting the right talent, this is something, and to be honest, that's also what the survey Global Talent Trends showed us. This is expected by the employees already. They expect you to be top-notch when it comes to technology, right? In particular, when you're selling that to your customers. And, you know, this is why HR has to catch up here. So with that being said, the majority of an employee life cycle, right, is something where you can really anticipate when it happens. And if you find out that you have like too many things bubbling up at the same moment, right, why don't you stretch it out? You have 12 months time in a year, right? So not everything has to happen between Jan and March and between October and December, right? And there are some activities which are ongoing permanently, right? So the biggest mistake we see when it comes to talent, for example, is that talent is punctual, right? You have this talent management review. We're talking about performance, we're talking about succession, ideally also about potential in an old talent management world once a year, right? I want to see the organizations and the customers where once a year is good enough when you're in a client relationship. So also a good reason to rethink that and to actively design it based on the expectations the employees actually have. So talking about this and talking about the HR function, since I referred a lot to technology already, there is also a need to rethink how an HR organization has to be built. And I want to show you just a rough prototype of a target interaction model. So what you see here is, first of all, as I stated earlier, the HR customer side. So we have the different groups of employees, we have external temporary staff or candidates, we have people managers, and we have executive leaders. On the right-hand side, outer right, you see the functional expertise. This is where usually the COEs are sitting, and we distinct between HR customer-facing communities like people acquisition, people development, and such, and more enterprise-serving communities where we have something like digitalization, but also comp and ben reporting, and so on and so on, right? So where we say that they use the other HR roles to weigh in their knowledge into the organization, where talent acquisition, in particular active sourcing, is directly working with candidates or with leaders. So what you see here, and this indicated by these arrows, is like, how do people actually interact? And for all interactions, we say, in the meantime, this is the new normal. We need something like a people operations platform or employee experience platform, right? And this has to be powered by AI. We need to learn permanently, you know, how we interact with our talent. Right? And this goes in all shades. It goes in operations as well as it goes in talent management. The supporting roles, and you see this here a little bit on the bottom for people managers. We said the classic HR business partner role is transforming and has to be transformed. We still have to cut out all this, let's say, generalistic, administrational, transactional work. I know we say this for decades already, but this time it's about to be real, because people operations, when you run a radical simplification up front, can be done much easier and without any help of an HR business partner. So the future HR business partner role, and this is why we rebranded here a little bit, is more so, it's supposed to be a leadership partner role, right? Team up with people managers to create great teams, to support them in their leadership capabilities, to ensure that all talent management measures, which are developed in the people development COE, for example, actually land with the people managers. Because very often for the people managers, it still feels like they're not running a leadership process, they're running an HR process, right? Talent review is an HR process. They don't understand this as a leadership process because it's like event-based, once a year, twice a year, if you're lucky, right? And this is where AI and this is where technology has a first play, right? It's about when the system can help you showing where are my gaps. I'm planning, to extend the business. I'm planning to build a new product. I'm planning to enroll something new to the client. What is the structure? What are the skills and capabilities I need? And do I have them? And if not, where do I get them, right? To find these gaps and have this indication, right? And have a technology helping anticipating that, right? Is the first step. And this is why this is the big bar in the middle here. The recognition of this problem, and then the leadership partner can step in and help, providing the right tools, the right upskilling, the right learning, supporting this in coaching and consulting, right? There's another role down here. You see, it's called talent broker. We see the external and the internal job market merging more and more, right? And, everybody knows that hiring from inside is always, much more efficient and less costly than hiring from outside, right? And it has a positive side effect that people, tend to rotate within the organization more often if that is an organized process, right? But also here we were actually lacking roles supporting that. So we came up with multiple clients now with a role called talent broker, right? Someone who knows what kind of talent sits within the organization, what are the clusters we have, what are the future clusters we need. And then again, and you see this arrow going here over to the platform again, technology helping them, right? Because they cannot be one or two people knowing all skills and capabilities of the organization. But it would be great to have one or two people asking the right questions, utilizing technology, and then give good recommendations, right? So the new talent broker role and the new leadership partner role only work with sufficient technology support, right? The other elements, people strategy advisor and people operations, right? There is also huge potential, right? So we are still burning too much capacity in people operations. Still 45 to 60% of all HR FTE are allocated in HR operations, which is a pity actually, because a lot of these transactions, could be radically simplified and taken over by more technology if we would really go with the technology, embrace it and trust it, right? The standard pattern still is, here is my operations process, or here's my talent process. Can you execute that in your new platform, right? Instead of saying like, what is the most simple way of running HR operations utilizing the technology we have, right? And how do we reduce the number or the capacity or the bound FTE in operations by being simpler, smarter, and more technology driven? This is how you should start every HR IT project, right? But also like the more established roles like people strategy advisor, right? So far, we have here great experienced people, giving good advice on how to translate business strategy in people strategy. But very often, if we're honest to ourselves, it has a lot to do with gut feeling, right? I know this market for 20 years. I know this business for 20 years. I know, this organization for 20 years, right? And gut feeling is good. Empathy is great. But business is about numbers. It's about knowing. It's not about guessing, right? So the closer we can get to, let's say, a good data foundation, the better it is. And the higher the people dependency of your organization is, the more talent related this information has to be, right? A company like ours, Mercer Professional Service Company, there's almost no way to grow for us other than with the right people and skills or an intelligent technology, right? We have no other levers, right? This is it, right? So we are already trusting a lot in technology and said like, okay, this has to help us progressing our business. So with that being said, two last slides. So tech is your friend, embrace it. This is what I want to say, right? HR has to bring in more trust into technology. It's not to take away jobs. It's more about making you successful in your role finally. After 20, 30 years of being, let's say, no, overlooked might be harsh, right? But so far, HR didn't play that role as it is playing today. So this in a nutshell, my last numbers, and then I'm super happy to hand over to Andrea after this slide, is what do we see? What's the power of the technology? We can increase efficiency. We can centralize much more manual tasks. We can increase the speed and quality also of digital workflows, right? Talent will follow a very different dimension utilizing latest technology. Being user-centric in your application, right? Really fulfill the business case, but also identify and serve the talent needs and therewith reduce the turnover, increase the mobility, increase compliance. This is where to go. And this will only happen if we bring in sync, and I mentioned that when I started, employee experience, people here in the middle, right? You have to put the experience in the center of everything you do. But then you have to design all four dimensions. Start with strategy and content. Talk about the processes, how you get organized, how you organize that, and which roles actually carry this out, and how you enable technology will drive you forward and make you hopefully successful. And this will lead to, if organizations who did that already have up to a 97% employee satisfaction rate. We have the opportunity to increase 30% with large players HR service efficiency when we ran these kind of transformations. And we have an 80% reduction in efforts for employees and managers and HR teams driving these old-fashioned 30 to 40 years old talent management processes. So that was my part, opening up a little bit here, the broader scope of the HR function, how the HR function has to weigh in themselves into the more talent-driven setup. Andrea, I would hand over to you.
So I just wanted to ask you a question. I just love hearing kind of the information you just shared with us. And so we know it's true. There's new technology available. We just went through a few years where it's very apparent HR needs to really embrace this new technology because it's been very difficult times with the pivots. So this is very exciting to me, and I love your idea of centering it on the experience of the employee or whatever stakeholder HR is working with. So it's exciting times for HR. I'm curious though, in your experience, are you seeing that HR leaders are kind of embracing this and starting to kind of move in this direction?
But definitely yes, because the need for their support has never been higher. I can say that one of the largest tech companies headquartered out here of Germany, 410,000 employees, just recently started the transformation and started with Tim, right? They just read the articles and said like, hey, putting the experience in the center of this consideration is great, but data and technology is what drives us forward. I just this morning had a conversation with, and I can share that because it's no secret, with BASF in Bayer. And that was a forum about how HR operations becomes the data mining and talent rotation platform for these organizations, right? Because nobody else is doing this job. And so I see the openness on the HR side to transform themselves into this new role because now they have the tools and they have the attention.
Mhm. That's great. That's really great. So I'm going to transition. I don't have the really beautiful cars on my slide that you did, but somehow maybe in the future I'll figure out how to incorporate that. I love kind of the analogies that you shared. Um, I'm going to transition to a discussion about intelligence and skills intelligence. and how it really enables the stakeholder experience. Before I do, I'm going to share some great intelligence with you so you can see it, and how it makes such a big difference. But before I do, I just want to share just a little bit of context on kind of the data that Eightfold has and where it comes from and why it's so powerful. So what you see on this page is really 3 points to make. One is that Eightfold has over 1 billion data sets, right? And that's data on jobs, the skills required for those jobs, and how individuals move through those roles and acquire skills, right? That comes from publicly available data sources, and it represents about half the world's workforce worth of data. So it's quite deep intelligence, and it's amazing kind of some of the insights that you'll see from this, and I'll share that with you in a second. What we do with our customers, we take that marketplace data, we integrate the intelligence into our customer HRS systems. And so for employees, we help companies really understand the skills their employees have. And for talent acquisition, we help companies understand the skills that their candidates have. So that's like the power of the intelligence, how we are able to help our customers. If you look at the third point here, this is like, I had implemented Eightfold and I was really wowed by how much was enabled through the intelligence. And I spent some time after I joined Eightfold just thinking about what unlocks all that. And the third box here just shows you that if you can know the skills your employees have and know the skills your candidates have and bring that together with the skill requirements that you have to drive business success for any role in the company, when you bring those two things together is what really unlocks everything around talent strategy. If I move to the next page, I want to share some of that intelligence with you. And again, with a lens on kind of the stakeholder experience, this is an example for business unit leaders, right? Very, very important stakeholders for HR. Having the ability to understand kind of what's happening with regards to skill trends. And so on this page, what you can see on the left are kind of what are the fastest rising roles in high tech organizations. And you can see some really dramatic changes happening, right, over time. And even more dramatic is if you take a look on the right, what's happening with skills and how are skills changing for high tech. So if you take a look at this, this is a 20-year window, and you can really see in the past 10 years, there's really been some accelerated changes. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the slope of these lines, it's actually changing in 5-year windows. Really dramatic changes happening with skills. So for your business leaders, this is really helpful to understand what's happening in the industry. Um, do I have the right skills, and am I prepared for the future with the skills of my organization? So really powerful from the standpoint of business leaders and kind of their experience and being able to kind of really plan for the right skills to drive the business results that they're trying to drive. On the next page, what HR leaders can really benefit from is, I think as you take a look at the workforce, there's a lot happening. If you look at all those transitions that are happening in terms of rising roles and rising skills, what's really important is that HR leaders are really wanting to upskill their organizations. What intelligence does for your HR leaders is it gives them the ability to understand where can they focus to really drive successful upskilling. So what you see on this page is on the left is a declining role that we see decreasing prevalence, which is a systems analyst. On the right, I think we're all familiar with this, is definitely a rising role, which is a cloud engineer, right? And one of the things that you're able to identify when you have kind of the AI is you're actually able to see there's a high degree of skill overlap between these two roles. You can see in the green box are direct skill overlap, and in the yellow boxes are related skill overlap. So that means for HR leaders, if they're really trying to drive growth and really trying to drive learning in their organization, focusing on certain roles and helping them kind of build their skills for these future roles, they can identify where in the organization they may want to focus for the greatest success. And this is great because you're actually helping your employees, right, really kind of build skill sets that are going to be very relevant for the future. The next page, what you'll see here is this is an employee perspective, right? We're talking a lot about employee experience. So if I'm a systems administrator and I want to look for like what are future roles I want to pursue, in my career path. And this is a great way they can actually see when they kind of are able to understand their skills and match to other roles, they can actually see I have a high degree of overlap for a cloud engineer role, for a business systems consultant role, and a DevOps engineer role, right? A great view for employees to have. And then they're empowered to shape the direction of their career. What I love here is I'll tell you my own personal story is when I was in college, I took um, some classes on programming and I was terrible. For some reason, that just was not an area of strength for me. So if I looked at this, I probably would not head down the path of cloud engineering. I would not head down the path of DevOps engineering. But guess what? Transformation is very central to what's important and what I'm passionate about. This business systems consultant role kind of really matches my interests. And so if I choose that pathway and I develop these skills to me, which are really interesting to me, your employees have an amazing experience. So giving your employees that transparency, which can be done today, helps them a lot in terms of building their career path and the direction that they might want to head. If you think about how it works today, unfortunately, there's no transparency on that. And a lot of times what employees do is they think about what roles they think they like based on organizations they're familiar with. If they want to reach out to find more, it depends on whether they know somebody in that organization. And that's how they find their way around career paths. And so it's much more based on who you know versus what you know. And that's the power of AI. It just really kind of unlocks the transparency of this for employees and then empowers them to choose the pathways that they want. So talk about a great experience. That's a great experience for employees. And the last example I want to share with you, this is really powerful. We're seeing a lot of our customers leverage this. I'm just going to talk through this because this page is dense with information. So what you see on the left box in bold are skills that are rising and highly competitive, right? So for example, Python, financial modeling, agile methodologies, and risk management are skills that are on the rise. A lot of companies are really competing for the same skills these days. And I hear a lot from talent acquisition leaders and recruiters that it's really competitive. It's really hard to find enough candidates and it's really expensive. So one of the things that Eightfold has with our depth of data and intelligence on skills is we are able to identify what we call adjacencies. So what we can see is what skills individuals have before they learn a new skill, right? So what you see on the right, we call that adjacent skills. And that's really powerful. It actually takes the idea of potential and makes it very scientific, right? So if you take a look at Python, right, if somebody has, and this is intuitive, if somebody has C++ experience, Java programming experience, R programming experience, their likelihood to pick up Python as a language is highly likely, right? So your ability to consider candidates um, based on these adjacent skills is really a strong way to really kind of increase your candidate pool and quality candidate pool. So, and if you take a look at this, as I said, a lot of this is intuitive, but it's great to have this for your recruiters to look at as they're considering, different talent that they want to look at. The power of this for recruiters is if you look on the right, and you take a look at the dark circles, the black circles, what this is telling you is the increase in candidate pool that you'll see, and the increase is anywhere from 3 times to 12 times your increase in the candidate pools. So you consider adjacencies, recruiters can increase their candidate pools by a lot and still maintain high quality talent. So again, the focus is on the experience. If you think about your recruiters as a stakeholder, giving them this as a tool helps them a lot in achieving, their objectives as they're trying to find candidates for their hiring leaders. So I love this slide because I think it's quite powerful. We're seeing a lot of our customers leverage this. And not only is it for external candidates, but even for internal employees. Like making decisions based on someone's potential to learn a new skill is wonderful, right? As an employee, um, you want your leaders to be kind of really betting on your success and your potential to learn a new skill. So I think that's what I want to share. I want to share kind of these insights on how intelligence is a big difference maker for experience.
Well, thanks, Andrea.
Yeah.
Um, cool. So we have 12 minutes left. I think I will just move the slides a bit faster. Um, so what is important when you actually start this journey, right? It's about being brave. It's about try, evaluate, adjust, and repeat. I mean, agile, everybody's talking about agile, but agile just means get started, right? Try it, actually do it, right? Learn from it. And learning didn't change, to be honest, right? We were always founding our learning on data. We were looking into books and try to find out, right? Now we're looking into data and say, okay, let us check if we do have these skills. Let us check if we can have something like a self-career pathing, right? So as Andrea just pointed out, I love this because when people talk about self-services, in systems, 90% talk about, changing your address, right? Or adding information for payroll, right? Instead of saying like, hey, are there other opportunities within this organizations where my skills can make a difference, where my skills can contribute to the company's success and I personally can progress, right? I think this is the new way of how self-services should be built. I skipped that one because that's more about, how you can start building this. Can you, oh, sorry, do you have the control or not? Sorry, I can see the screen here. Can I click one more? Oh, thank you. Sorry. All right, to sum it up, how to get started. And I want to start again with this interaction model to operating model, right? So start business priorities, the customer needs, consider your employee life cycle, get through it, make it tangible, find the data points, then define the right role supporting this, being supported by technology. This is the tech solution. And then start use case testing. Take these ideas and try them, right? This is all you're operating this transformation on a in-flight. On a plane in flight, right? So you have to test these use cases and then build ratios, derive that, build more country models, go into a target sizing, and then adjust reporting lines, right? Instead of starting with boxes and lines, and they will do the job. This will not happen, right? So target interaction design and then transferring it over to target operating model with embracing and putting employee experience and utilizing the right technology is key here. So with that being said, thank you very much for listening here. We will open up the mics now for Q&A. And always remember, Tim and Tom are powered by AI.
Armin, I'm seeing just one question.
Yeah.
I think we have just a few minutes to answer it, which is around how do you validate the skills or assess the skill at scale? So I think that question is around really looking at whether you're talking about employees or candidates. Um, so we have the data at scale, actually. So we have a strong ability to identify the skills, right, that individuals have. Actually, we even have the ability when employees kind of complete their skills outline or candidates, you're looking at skills, we have the ability to even infer what skills they're likely to have that they didn't highlight, or skills that you might want to inquire more about because it doesn't look like people that have had these roles in the past are likely to have those skills. And so our validation is really by kind of the depth of data that we have and be able to take a look across that role consistently across multiple industries and even within a company. So that's kind of the statistical significance is quite high of our skills intelligence. what we think is really important with AI is you want humans, right, involved in the decision making. And so if you're a recruiter, just probing on those skills and really understanding more and validating more, or really looking at the skills and what you're looking for and what makes sense in terms of the matching. So we believe the intelligence is there. And Armin, I think you talked about that. The data is there to help you in your decision making, but ultimately, as the individual, whether you're employee, a recruiter, a leader in the organization, the decision is being made by a human.
Hmm.
So I think, yeah, the intelligence is just there to help you as you look at information and give you information to make those decisions.
Hmm. One practical example even, so it starts even sometimes even earlier, right? So Bosch, when they decided, to transfer themselves and with them 410,000 employees from an engineering company into an IoT company, right? The first step was questioning, do we have the right skills and capabilities on board, right? And they ran through this assessment, and they came to the point that a third of all, staff was not ready for the next step. So they had to start building measures and say like, okay, what do we have to do to keep most important people in here, because they're also representing culture? What are the development steps? But also, how is the demographics, working against us, right? Where do we lose the talent we would want to keep and things like that? So asking their questions, collecting these data points, and then run the technology, to get findings and, validate your hypothesis like, okay, this upskilling will take, for example, 1 or 2 years, but up until then, we have already lost like that many people through demographics. So our recruiting pipeline has to fill this up at the same time. So the outcome was finding out the demand on upskilling, but also the recruiting demand without even having planned new budgets, just, to keep the current state. And I think, as Andrea just said, the people asking wise questions, sitting, equipped with the right technology, this is what makes it powerful.
Yep, that's right.
So here's another question. Can you comment on how you link to the key business KPIs and fine-tune your target roles? So this is something from a strategic standpoint. Very often, these people strategy advisors start with, right? They connect the dots between a business success and the dependency on people, and how people or the workforce can actually influence that, and how we can measure that, right? So if it is simple things like utilization, or if it's just the speed of learning, to keep up with one of your market competitors and measure that, right? We certify people in the pharmaceutical industry, learning more skills now after we learned how important mRNA vaccines became, within 6 months. But not everybody can actually build this or can work on this. So for large pharmaceuticals, it was super important to bring your workforce up to speed. Right, and then there was a target given by the board and a measurement how far and how fast have we progressed.
Yeah, and I could just build on that for a second, right? So one of the things we work with our customers on is really benchmarking what skills they have in their organization versus the industry or their competitors. And they can understand, like, where are my strengths and where are my opportunities? And those differences, are they important for me for my business objectives? And organizations can identify, like, these are skills that are important for us to build. And that's a great way to track from an HR perspective, like the success in terms of upskilling. Like, are you getting more prevalence of the skill in your organization? I think that's a great measurement. I
Hmm.
think the other thing that I'm seeing a lot of metrics that we measure for our customers are things like, are people applying for roles? Are they moving internally? Are you seeing kind of an uptick in terms of that engagement from your employee base, which I think is really important, because if they're not looking internally, then they're going to look externally. So what is the velocity of individuals in your organization that are looking at roles, if they're able to get this transparency? What is their engagement in their profiles and really kind of maintaining their profiles and leveraging the ability to match different roles? We see some really strong uptick in terms of diversity, right? Whether it's women or in the U.S. underrepresented minorities. applying for roles, we're seeing a gigantic uptick in terms of application rates when they can have access to this transparency and match the different jobs, right? And so that's great. These are great metrics to take a look at in terms of your organization. Are they building their skills? Are they moving across roles internally? Do your diverse talent, are they also engaged in terms of their movement? These are really important metrics that you can see.
Hmm. Here's another question. I think we have 2 minutes left about augmented reality and virtual reality in the learning ecosystem. So I will say for many technology-driven organizations, this is already reality. We just work with Lufthansa Technik, so that's tech ops, repairing their planes and doing the maintenance whatsoever. On almost all learning, but also performing work is already supported by either AR or virtual reality. So they can very difficult, let's say, operations can be trained in virtual reality and augmented reality. It's sometimes, they have their glasses on, they look onto specific parts of the plane, and the system will support them. If they, for example, pick the wrong screwdriver because it's normed, they only can use a specific screwdriver, or if they picked up the wrong screw or the wrong part and stuff like that. So there, it's already here. We see first, let's say, first attempts to also do this in a more, let's say, interaction-based business, like how to negotiate with someone, for example, right? So this is when you talk to people, like virtual reality supported, let's say, sceneries, but this is more in this starting phase, I will say. Yeah, Andrea, I don't know if you have, or Eightfold has any more insights in that part as well.
I I I don't. I think part of what we try to do, from kind of our area of expertise is allow people to see, the areas that they might want to learn more. And then I think companies have very different approaches in terms of kind of their offerings. And just for us, it's just making sure we're connecting those offerings to kind of the career paths that employees can identify.
Mm.
Yeah.
What I will say as a closing comment is I think the gap is getting bigger. I think that's what's concerning me personally, is like the very progressed companies versus the average companies. And the only way to, and this brings us back to our topic, right, to leapfrog this is, utilizing the technology in a proper way where it's business leveraging, right? So, and HR is it's almost like a catalyst, because people don't embrace technology when they're not trusting and when it's not empathetic, sorry, and it's not driving their experience. We're at the top of the hour. I hope you enjoyed it. Andrea, thank you for having me as a guest.
And thank you for joining. And then I'll have to talk to you about how I incorporate cars, because I think they were beautiful slides that you had into my slides. But thank you very much.
Happy
This
to.
was very insightful.
Thank you.